Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we talk about zonal geraniums. So let's go. I've made a few videos when it comes to zonal geraniums, and I'll be sure to add links to those videos down in the description below. One video was taken last fall where I showed you how to take your zonal geraniums and bring them in so you could overwinter them bare root. Another video showed you the process for waking up those dormant geraniums that were bare root. I've also made videos showing you how to start geraniums from seed, which is actually a very simple process. And then finally, I've made a video showing you how to go about propagating geraniums from cuttings. And later on in the video, I'll show you the results because I did an experiment trying to root those cuttings a few different ways. And I'm very excited to show you how it turned out. Today is April 18th. I'm about 4 weeks from my average last frost date here in New Hampshire. So these geraniums are still very tender and they cannot be planted out in the landscape or out in pots quite yet. However, what I'm planning to do is I am going to pot them up. I'm going to give them some fertilizer and I'm going to slowly start hardening them off. I have a rolling cart that basically comes out during the daytime as long as the temperatures are okay and they're not freezing. That way my plants that are on the rolling cart are getting sunshine, they're getting wind, they're getting all the things they need to survive and do well. But then every night I bring that rolling cart back into my garage because a lot of the plants that are on that cart cannot handle the really cool weather. In fact, later this week, we're going to have temperatures that dip down near 31, 32 degrees. The geraniums would not be happy. But you can see how lovely they're looking. They are just gorgeous. And it's been a number of years since I've actually bought zonal geraniums. I've had a lot of luck overwintering these geraniums. Now you can definitely propagate zonal geraniums from seed. It's actually very easy. There are a lot of places where you can buy the seeds online. But for me personally, I don't need a ton of geraniums. I want enough to put around my landscape in my yard, but I don't want to give up all that real estate under my grow lights simply because I grow so many other plants under my grow lights. So this year, I pretty much had one 10 by 20 tray dedicated for geraniums, and that's more than I need for my own yard. When it comes to starting geraniums from seed, you definitely need grow lights. And so one way of getting around that, if you don't have grow lights, is to overwinter your geraniums. And there are a lot of different ways you can do it, but the way that works for me is to do it bare root. And what I really like about it is you can get away with doing this process and not have any grow lights. I have had these geraniums under my grow lights. However, they would have been fine if I had put them in a very sunny window on the south side of my house. So what I want to start with is I want to go over some of the bare root geraniums that were potted up and show you what they look like and talk you through what the next steps are for them. Look how pretty this color is. It's a nice light pink color. I just think it's gorgeous. And as many times as I keep cutting off the blossoms off my geraniums, because I don't want them to put the energy into the flowers. I really want them to put the energy into just getting to be a bigger plant and putting the energy into a good root system. They just keep blooming for me. And they're beautiful. I've been enjoying them. What we're going to do today is we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut back all the blossoms. Now you can take the blossoms and put them in a vase. That's definitely an option if you want to do that. And you just want to follow it all the way down to the base of the plant. The next thing we're going to do is just look for any leaves that don't look very good. And now is a great time to remove those. So this leaf right here would be a good one to remove. You can either use your pruners, scissors, or just pull them off gently. Now you can see this is last year's old growth, and a lot of the new growth came on the sides. Isn't that wonderful that it survives the winter just like that? I think it's great. And I'm noticing another bud right here. I'm going to remove that. I wasn't great about labeling all of my geraniums last year, but you can see this one I did label, and I just put down that it's a pink color. So at this point, what we're going to do is now remove this geranium from this pot. And that's because I wanted to put it in a bigger pot, basically just so it can just keep on growing and getting larger. And I'm using just regular potting mix. I make my own potting mix. It's a mixture of peat moss and vermiculite, but you can definitely buy your own potting mix. I'm just taking a little bit of the soil off at the base, but you don't have to do that. And you can see it has a nice, great root system to it. And it's moving up into quite a bit larger pot, as you can see. Real estate is always at a premium, so I figured this is a good size pot. I don't need to go any larger than that. The potting mix has been pre-moistened, but we will add more water in the end. I'm just going to check it. I want to see the where the roots fall when it comes to the pot. You would want this section right here to basically be above the soil line, similar to what it was in the last pot. So this is pretty good. And even though I have been using Miracle Grow, at this point I'm going to use this slow release Osmocote. I bought this on Amazon and it's quite a large bag. And it's actually quite a bit cheaper than the price that I saw at a big box store recently. So if you want to buy some of it, buy a nice big bag off Amazon. It's much cheaper. And I'm just adding a small sprinkling, and it's going to be at the base where the roots are. We're going to go ahead, put that in there, and then we're going to backfill. If there are any leaves that are at the base that are touching, you can always remove those. Last year, I had potted up my geraniums, and I put them on the rolling cart before our last average frost date, and they were gorgeous. They just got huge. And that's my goal again for right now, is to just pot these up a little bit, give them some slow release fertilizer, start hardening them off, and within a month they will be nice and big, and then I can put them in a decorative potter container. And that's good. So now at this point, we're going to go ahead and just give it some water. This time of year, it's important, because it's still cool outside, to make sure that I'm giving my plants water, but I don't want to give them too much water. I don't want to rot them. So it's always a good idea, let them dry out a little bit before you give them more water. So this should be enough for a number of days now. Okay, so this guy is alive, right? But it doesn't look great. And I really think that it just needs to be outside and it will take off. I remember I had some other geraniums that were just like this last year. And as soon as I brought them outside and they were in a bigger pot, they had the slow release fertilizer, they just took off. So we're going to start with by taking off this blossom that's right here. And at this point, I'm not going to cut anything back. I want to just leave it as is and just see what happens. This one also has a label, which is good. I love reusing pots. I got this from a local nursery. They were free to me. And I especially love using square pots because I can really nest them closer to each other than the round pots. I do use round pots when I run out of square pots, but I do love a square pot when I can get my hands on them. I'm noticing the roots are hardly even there, but somehow this plant is still doing okay. But my hope is that the roots will really take off as soon as it gets placed in this container here. And believe it or not, there's a little tiny bud. Let's take that off down here. So pretty. I just love them. We're going to go ahead again and take off the blossoms first. There's a bud right there. We're going to remove that. And here's a leaf that does not look good, so we're going to remove that. This one does not have a label in it, so we will create a label and we'll put that in the end. Let's go ahead and take this out of the pot. I never labeled which one of my geraniums were the ones that I started from seed and which ones were the ones that I had overwintered. But I'm almost positive just by looking at this, I believe that this is one that I started from seed. And some people could argue the ones that you start from seed just maybe look more lush and look healthier. But again, we have to keep in mind not everyone has grow lights. And also, typically, the ones that you overwinter will end up being a much bigger plant than the ones that you started from seed for that first season that, that I started this plant. This won't be as big. That's usually the case. But I have plenty of geraniums, more than I probably even need for this year. Okay, so we're going to add some slow release fertilizer. I'm just calling them coral pink because they're almost like a salmon or a coral light pink. And what's really nice is these were geraniums that I started from seeds that I collected myself last year. And I'll make a video later this season showing you how to collect your own seeds from your geranium plants. Okay, that one's all done. At this point, I think what I'm going to do is let me wrap up and finish up with just potting up and giving fertilizer to the rest of these geraniums, label them if they don't have labels for their colors, and then I'm going to show you the results of the geraniums that together we rooted. And let's see which ones rooted and which ones didn't. Okay, so these geraniums have all been potted up, fertilized, watered, and I've also cut back any of the blossoms. And there are quite a few here. There's 12 here, which I am more than happy with. And out of the 12, one looks like it may or may not have survived, so time will tell. One looks okay. There's still a little bit of growth on there. The hope is that they'll take off now that it's just been potted up. And one still is, quite small, but I potted it up anyway. One thing I wanted to mention is I will probably come back in at some point and take some more cuttings. If I get around to it, that would be great, especially off these bigger ones here, just so that it puts more growth towards the base. We did that in a previous video. We had taken some cuttings off of the top growth, and I noticed that the plants are just much happier, much bushier. So that's something that's very easy to do. But I just wanted to give you this update, and it's very obvious the ones that were overwintered. You can see that there's kind of like old growth and then there's the new growth. But the main thing is that they're alive, they're thriving, and they are just going to keep taking off because we still have a month before I can even plant them outside. They're all very good and healthy. Okay, so now I'm very excited to show you the results of our geranium cuttings that we took a little while ago. And I had taken the cuttings and done them 4 different ways. I wanted to show you how everything looks, but then also kind of talk a little bit about each one. So let's start with this one here. This one has an R on it. And R means rooting hormone. We applied just the smallest amount of rooting hormone on there, but then we did not put this on a heat mat. So it was under LED shop lights, but it also was not receiving any additional bottom heat. The first thing to notice is that there is a little bud on it, and that's always a good sign, is that it's trying to form a blossom. So let's go ahead and remove it from the pot and let's see what we find. And you can see that it definitely has started creating roots. It has one very long root and then a bunch of small roots, which is very exciting. What we're going to do now is remove this bud, and we're going to just pot this up into a larger pot with some slow release fertilizer, some water, and it's just going to be with the rest of its friends. So now let's look at the next one. This one has RH, which means rooting hormone was applied, but it also received bottom heat. So the biggest thing is bottom heat was added, rooting hormone was added. One thing I want to mention about my experiment was that because of the heat mat, every so often the ones that were on the heat mat would dry out a little bit too fast for my liking. So that might have affected the fact that the plants might not have done as well as I was hoping, but you can see that there's still growth. It's not dead and it looks okay. And let's go ahead and see if it formed any roots. Okay, so you can see for this one here, it doesn't look great. The top part is still clearly alive, but when you look at the bottom, I don't see any roots that have formed. What we're going to do with this one is we are going to still stick it back, but we're going to put it in a bigger pot. I'm still going to add fertilizer just because and add some water, and it's going to go with its friends. But that shows me that you probably don't need bottom heat in order to root your geraniums. But let's just keep going. It might seem silly to be potting this up and to be giving it fertilizer, but I just want to be done with this job and basically bumping up all my geraniums. So time will tell how this one does. But for right now, we're just going to put the label back in here. And add just a small amount of fertilizer. And we're going to stick this in here and we'll see what happens. And I'm not going to add any additional water. I can tell that this is pretty wet. And then there were two. Let's see. This one doesn't have anything written on it. It shows the color that it came from a plant that had red flowers. And you can see that there's a bud on there, which is a good sign. But since it has nothing written on there, that means that we did not put any rooting hormone on this. And also this was not on a heat mat. And you can see that it is starting to callus over. You look very carefully. And also it is just starting to create roots. So I would call that a success. This is still pretty moist, so I'm not going to add any water, but that one is good to go. Okay, and then we have our final one here, last but not least. And it just has red because it was taken from a plant that had red blossoms, and it has H. That means no rooting hormone was applied to this one, but it was placed on a heat mat, so it was receiving the bottom heat. It looks a little sad, but I would not say that the plant is dead. You'll notice that, again, it does not have any callusing, and there are no roots that are being formed. However, we're still going to pot it up, and we're still going to just see if we can get this to root and create a nice looking plant. I really hope you enjoyed the content that was provided in today's video. I feel like when it comes to gardening, gardening can be one big experiment, but that's how we learn, right? And I love experimenting with different plants, and especially when it comes to propagating plants, be it from seed or from cutting. I love trying to overwinter plants that are not hardy in my zone. And most importantly, I love then sharing with you my successes as well as my failures. And I think with failures, it's a good thing because we learn what can we do differently. And when it comes to the whole overwintering of geraniums, there's so many different ways you can do it. But this process has worked for me when it comes to overwintering them bare root. One thing that I wanted to share was that it's very important to check your bare root geraniums at least once a month. And also, you want to make sure that they don't fully dry out. That is very, very important. So you want to make sure you're spritzing the roots of your geranium. And one thing that I'm going to do differently this coming winter is I will spritz the roots of some of my geraniums, But then I'm also going to try something different, which is soaking the roots of my geranium. And I'll be sure to show you that in the winter time, because I think that maybe that might be a more successful way of overwintering your geraniums, is really giving those roots a good drink of water. But the important thing is when you take the plants and put them back into storage, you don't want to store them where the leaves are all wet and the plants are all wet. So that's something that I'm going to try this winter, is soaking those roots with water. Um, and I'll let you know how that works out as well. I'll be sure to give you updates on all of these geraniums and how they're looking. But for right now, they are ready to go out on my rolling cart. They'll be getting some nice sun and some wind, but they'll come in every night. And they have about 1 month of being on the rolling cart. I hope you're able to get out in your gardens. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.